here I have an animation which is a run cycle I've been working on. So I have in a sprite, you can actually label animations. So you can have like animation frames. You can like define animation loops in your um, project. GIMP does not support this whatsoever. Um, so, for example, I have an idle. I have like one frame, which is like the start of the run, where it's like super exaggerated, and then it goes into this run cycle, which will repeat like this. And you'll notice I've named the layers run 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. Now, the reason I've incremented the index of the frame by 2 is because I intend to create in-betweens here, but I haven't done it yet. So this is run 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and then back to 1. This is a 12 frame run cycle, but currently I've only animated 6 of the 12 frames. So if I want to preview the whole animation, what I'll do is I'll have the idle sprite last 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second, and then I'll have the run start. I think I want this to last just 100 milliseconds as well, which is the default. So now if I enter my preview dialog, you can actually change the magnification by entering into this field a value. So I can have it be 500% or like 400% or whatever. This never used to be here. You used to just have to look at your animations at a thumbnail size, which was as painful and tedious as it sounds. But you can see here, this is the preview for the running animation. Now, you may be asking yourself, what on earth is this supposed to be? I like to do the construction of my characters before I actually start to animate them. So the character here is essentially a stick figure. It doesn't have any defined anatomy or detail yet because my focus is getting the poses correct before I go for the detail, because it is really easy to change the poses when you're just working with the construction of the character. Like I just use a box for the torso and the rib cage, and just lines for the hands and the legs and the arms and the feet, and just a circle for the head, or a sphere with a little circle here. And I'll just show you what this is supposed to look like for a frame. So let's say I wanted to prettyify one of the animation frames like this one. Now, I will lower the opacity of the sketch and increase the opacity of the background, and I'll create a new layer called render, for example. And then using a 1 opacity brush, what I can actually do is go in here and so I want my character to have a face, obviously. And my character's a very angry guy, so the first thing I do is I start with angry eyebrows, because I love me some angry eyebrows. But one thing you also need is a jaw. Now, I work at a very low resolution because I love making pixel art. It's sort of my passion. You'll notice that the head is actually too big, and it occludes the arms, so I'm going to scale this down, and I'm actually going to change the interpolation to none. Interpolation is a funny thing, so I'm just going to explain briefly what interpolation is. So let's say I draw this smiley face here. Now, if I scale this with cubic interpolation, it's going to produce this blurry mess of pixels because it's averaging the results effectively. If I do no interpolation, then it will give me a direct upscale that preserves the pixels, which is really helpful if you're working for pixel art, if you're just doing pixel art. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw like the hands and the body, for instance. You can probably, if you're familiar with my work, you can probably guess what character this is. Hint, it's Goku from Dragon Ball Z, if you're not familiar. I'm a big fan of Goku from Dragon Ball Z. If you're curious on what this character is supposed to be, it's Goku from Dragon Ball Z. Um, Boom, look at that. Now it's a thing. It's not actually just a thing anymore. It's a thing. Now this is great. I actually can tell what this is supposed to look like. But what if I want to make this pixel art? What if I wanted to make this like a sprite? Well, that's easy. All you got to do is lower the opacity here, and then we're going to make a layer called line. And I'm going to use the pencil tool here, and I'm going to set it to no dynamics because if you use like pressure opacity, it still affects the opacity. But if we're doing pixel art, we don't want alpha because reasons. So the first thing I like to do is go with a just hard line pass like this. I'm doing this extremely roughly because I'm lazy. Now, I want to avoid jaggies, so I'm going to try and draw a line which only increments in you should check out Derek. If you're interested in pixel art, I highly recommend Derek Yu's tutorials on it on his blog, Make Games. They're fantastic. Very approachable and beginner-friendly tutorials on pixel art. I would not recommend going on Google or YouTube and Googling how to make pixel art because most of the stuff you will find there is absolute garbage, unfortunately. No offense. I mean, there's some great pixel artists on YouTube. It's just, I do not trust Google to return results that are actually useful because their business model incentivizes sensationalized crap. I don't know. Call me a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, but it's like their business model prioritizes so-called engagement or how effectively can companies addict you into their online services over quality of information. Like Google search used to be a tool for researchers to obtain useful information, and it used to rank pages using an algorithm called the page rank algorithm. I know, creative, but they have kind of, they're not really Google is not really your friend, just FYI. Like they are a big evil corporation and they are here to steal your information. Like they're here to turn a profit, and that means you are the product. I know this is very wake up sheeple crap, but and you'll see here I'm eliminating the jaggies because I hate jaggies. If you're asking what is a jaggy, again, well, here, Pixel Art 101. What's the difference between this line and, oh, good grief, they're really just going to make it do it manually. What's the difference between this line and this line? Or what's the difference between this line and this line? So the difference is that the changes in the line's movement are constant. So this line increments by 2 pixels consistently. This one increments by 1 pixel consistently, whereas these ones are bumpy. It's like this 2 pixels, 2, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, B, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 3. It's annoying. So essentially eliminating jaggies just means instead of making a line like this, actually this line is really good. Forget what I said. Forget what I said. And sometimes you can just like one-shot the line tool and accidentally make a perfect line. Love it when that happens. Boop. Now you'll notice that I'm manually placing these pixels. I'm not just drawing them haphazardly. This is because one of the key principles that makes pixel art an art form is that a lot of care is determined into where the pixels go at the individual pixel level. If at this moment your eyes are rolling out of the back of your skull in absolute boredom, then this probably is not your cup of tea. Good blog post to read is Pixel Artist Renounces Pixel Art. Basically, TLDR, the summary of the blog post, or the abstract, if you will, is that pixel art is a dead medium. It is underappreciated, takes a lot of effort to produce, and no one appreciates it. If I go to this website, you will also see that companies like OpenAI have been very interested in intellectual property theft and generating slop pixel art like this. So this is not real pixel art, and I'm gonna be very annoying here, but the reason it's not real pixel art is because it's not actually the pixel size is not consistent. So it's a bit hard to tell from the picture here, but if I look at this image, for instance, you'll notice that there's actually, it's hard to tell because by default the interpolation on most image viewing programs is not nearest neighbor. But if I preview this image in the GNU image manipulation program, you will notice that there's a lot of blur here and artifacts, and that in fact this is not actually pixel art at all, because it's just images that look vaguely like pixel art. But you'll notice this line is 1 pixel, this line is 1 pixel, but then this line is 2 pixels wide. In fact, it's just, but this is sort of what I like to call so retro syndrome. It doesn't really matter whether it's pixel art or not, because most people won't be able to tell the difference unless you're actually an artist. Anyway, the tangent aside, so we have this little goober here. Now, I've drawn the line work, but the real fun comes in when we want to do what is known as anti-aliasing. Now, anti-aliasing is a technique invented by the ancient Greeks. It's named after the Greek god Aliacidenosopoulos, who basically decided to invent a new technique to chart the seas, where he would... Anyway, I might as well explain what the hell I'm going on about. So look at this line. This line is very jagged. Now look at what happens if I add pixels to this line, and then I go and do this, and I say this, and I say hello. Boop, 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 boop. Notice how the line is no longer as pixelated. It looks a bit more smooth. That's because I've actually added detail at the sub-pixel level to make something more smooth than it actually is. So if I wanted to reiterate this example with circle, look at this, it looks all jagged. Now if I go ahead and add some pixels around the circle, suddenly it's not so jagged anymore. So essentially anti-aliasing is the process of making pixel art look smooth even though we're conforming to a pixel grid, because the aim of pixel art is not to conform to the pixel grid but to escape the pixel grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strategically add pixels that are in between the brightness of the line and the background to smooth out some of these hard edges. I can also use it to define a bit more detail if I want. I'm going to make his nose a little more readable because this is a small scale artwork. Okay, next we need some solid color because this image is looking very flat. So I'm just going to, normally you'd want to work with the color palette, but I'm just going to eyeball this. Ba-da-ba-da-ba. His jeans are blue, so I'm gonna make them blue. Dabba-dee, abba-da, dabba-dee, abba-da, abba-dee, abba-da. And his hood, which I forgot to draw, is a darker brown. Now, the wonderful thing about pixel art is we like to reuse colors. So because his hood is dark brown and his hair is also dark brown, we're just going to use the same color because on less powerful hardware, such as like the NES, for example, there was actually physical limitations in the amount of colors you could use. So most pixel artists take it as a challenge to use as little colors as possible for their artworks. This is no longer necessary for modern artworks, but it's more of a stylistic choice. Now you'll notice that the gray anti-aliased pixels do not blend well with the colors we've chosen. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to swap them out for something a little more appropriate. So I'm going to use this magic color selection tool. Let's see here. Shift O is the shortcut. I don't really assign a custom shortcut for this one. Now I'm going to hold Control to select this color. I'm going to make it darker. I'm going to hit the pencil tool and I'm going to make my brush bigger. And then look at this. As I draw over these pixels, I'm only affecting these ones. So for example, I can draw over these like this and like that. I don't really have a dark brown color, so I'm just going to make one real quick. And then I can add some anti-aliasing to the hair. Great. It still looks very flat though, the picture. So I think we need some light and shadow. So, but before we proceed with this, a cool hack I like to do is the color balance tool. So this is basically the free make your picture look good button. Using this tool, you can literally just adjust sliders to change the colors and usually you can make your image look much nicer. So see, I can add some purple into the brown and look at that. Look at how much more interesting this looks. Another thing I like to do is create a layer, use the paint bucket tool and hold shift and paint, and now it's completely white, and we're going to set the blending mode to HSV color. And now what this has done is made the image completely grayscale. And now using this, I'm going to select these areas, hold Control U. That's weird. Normally there's a keybind for that. Hue, saturate. HSL. What? What have they done? What have they done? Please hold whilst I determine. Here we are. So another keyboard shortcut I like is I set Control U to the hue saturation dialog. What this dialog does is it allows you to change the hue, lightness, and saturation of any part of your image. So you can just do this, change this. I'm going to make the jeans darker so that they read better, and I'm also going to make the jacket brighter so that it reads a little better. Actually, no, I'm not going to make the jacket brighter, but I am going to make the gloves brighter specifically. Yeah. Now I want to select the gloves, but not the shoes. So I have to switch to the fuzzy select tool, and then I can increase the lightness. Okay, this is looking decent. How can we make this look better? The first thing we need to do is we need to add some light and shadow like I alluded to before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this color, make it slightly darker, change the hue a little until I'm happy, and then I'm going to use the select by color, which I normally map to W. Now, that is funny. Yeah, this program is very intuitive if you haven't already picked that up. All right, whatever. Now that I have this selected, I can just increase the brush size and just paint in only this layer. I can also do that here. Like I can select this. I'm actually going to make this lighter so that I can paint in some shadow like this. Now, it's useful to have some understanding of how light actually works when you're doing pixel art. So let's say I have this ball here and it's made out of a matte color. So you could have the light, which is the sun. Typically, what I do is I have the light, which is the sun, for instance, an imaginary light source hitting this object from the front, but also from the top and the left. So it creates shadows around here. So that's what I'm doing with this pixel art here. Another thing is his jacket has a zipper, but I want it to be less visible. It doesn't need to have a harsh edge, so I'm just going to do that. What else? The hood could use some highlights. The hair could use some highlights. I'm actually going to create a new color, which is sort of an intermediary here. And I'm going to make it more orange because I feel like orange is interesting. Like that. I'm also going to add some detail here, like this. Erase this pixel. We can use this as a dark color, and then this is a light color. You can just share colors across everything. That's cool. His shoes, the sneakers, they have this weird detail where they have a triangle on the front. I still do not understand how shoes actually work. I'm going to anti-alias this edge here to make it a little smoother. I'm noticing this arm doesn't really make a lot of sense, so I'm going to bring this in a little closer, and I'm going to make this cuff a little more visible. Like so. Whoops. Now, I want the eyes to have the highest contrast because they're the window to the soul. Uh, and I'm going to reuse this dark brown color I made for the hair as a sort of uh, shadow tone for the skin, like this. I'm going to place a shadow below the nose. No, I'm not. I'm going to place a highlight here so that the nose sort of looks more visible. I'm also going to place maybe a highlight here so that the top of the eye is a little more visible. Okay, this looks decent. However, the black outline is kind of harsh. I actually think this jumper should be a bit brighter. This black outline is a little harsh. So what we can do is we can do a technique called selective outlining. So I'm going to select the whole outline. And then what I'm going to do with the outline selected is I'm going to select the darkest red color. And then with the larger brush, I can paint over here the areas which are illuminated. And this will give the outline a lighter color around the edges. So it's sort of not completely dark. Shout outs to Jetrel and DGR from Fregato and Friends. They are amazing. If you don't know, Fregato and Friends is a game with some of the best pixel art ever witnessed by humanity ever. You should check it out. It's a great game. Additionally, this side of the genes could do with some selective outlines. So again, just going to do that, and then I can do this. Yes, another common pixel art mistake I want to direct your attention to is banding. So say I have a line here. It looks ugly if you do this. It looks, it's just gross. Don't do that. Unless you're using these pixels as like anti-aliasing or something for like this. But if you're just doing this, it looks kind of gross. Like keep it clean. Or you can do this, I guess, if you're wanting like some anti-aliasing. I don't know if my thought thread is really reading very well, but I'm also going to use this white color as a bit of a highlight for the gloves here because they're illuminated. Does that look good? Nah, maybe not. Yes. Do not accidentally use the paintbrush tool or else you will blow up the color count for your images. Yeah, so when you see this, I see this. This is what I'm intending to create. But you're like, what's this? It's just circles and lines. No, it's my blueprint for the animation. Because if I start with this, then there's too much detail. Like, you've got to take an iterative approach to creating animation if you want to stay sane. Like, start with the construction first, then do the detail. Um, I'm going to remove the outline at the bottom of the hood because I think it adds a bit too much detail. I mean, too much noise, I guess. I'm going to use this dark hair color to define the bottom of the face. Yeah, that looks a little better. Yeah, that looks better. Now, it's very easy to get stuck just continuously iterating the same sprite for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, but you really do have to just say good enough at some point. Which is why I'm going to iterate on this sprite for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Gonna add some little pixels here to imply fingers. Notice how there's no actual fingers, but adding them here kind of implies fingers. Very difficult to actually draw hands at this scale. I mean, like articulate fingers. So usually you can just get away with adding a little bit of pixels to imply the detail because you're working at such a small scale. Another thing I like to do is I like to give him bell-bottom jeans. I don't know why he wears these crazy jeans. They're probably not practical. I mean, this character, Goku from Dragon Ball Z, he's a bit of a fighter, so it doesn't really make sense that he'd be wearing a jumper. Probably get very hot very quickly, but whatever. Adding a light source here to imply that there's a fold that faces the direction. No, that looks stupid. Yeah, so this is the finished product. That's how you make pixel art in GIMP, and also a little primer on how you do animation. So if you wanted to make a pixel art animation, you basically just repeat all the steps I just described. And you're probably wondering to yourself, gee, this seems very time consuming. And that's because it is.